Hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 30th of July. You're tuned into our mid-morning newscast here on ARIRANG TV. I'm Mark Broom. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. Voting is underway for Korea's largest ever by-elections. 15 districts are up for grabs in what pundits are dubbing a mini general election. Korea's industrial output grows over 2% on month in June, raising expectations the economic recovery might be gaining traction. Plus, the United States and the EU announced new sanctions targeting Russia's energy, banking and defense sectors as they look to increase the cost to Russia of its continued support for pro-Moscow rebels in eastern Ukraine. But our top story this morning, polling stations are open in 15 districts around the country for Korea's largest ever by-elections. Koreans living in the contested areas can cast their vote at polling booths set up in the 15 electoral districts until 8 p.m. Korea time. Political watchers have dubbed these by-elections a mini general election that will serve as a mid-term referendum on President Park Geun-hye's Conservative administration. Now, these by-elections come hot on the heels of the local elections in early June, in which neither the ruling nor the main opposition party claimed any kind of clear-cut victory. The voter turnout during the two-day early voting period that ended on Saturday was just shy of 8%. That's actually a record for early voting in by-elections. Now, our Yoo Li-an is at a polling station in what's been identified as a key battleground. That is Seoul's Dongjak B district. This is the only district in Seoul voting today and looks set to be a very tight race. Li-an, we aren't expecting a huge turnout, but have you been seeing voters filter in?
Hi, Mark. The polling stations have opened just about 4 hours ago, and I have been seeing a constant stream of voters come in to cast their ballots. Now, this district that I'm in right now, this Dongjak B district, is one of the most hotly contested districts, contested seats actually, for this by-election, and it is also a major swing region. Now, when looking at the recent local elections, candidates from the ruling Saenuri Party and main opposition party split Dongjak B, taking 2 seats each. Now, this region also had the second highest early voter turnout rate, which shows residents here are eager to have their voices heard. Now, in this district, ruling Saenuri Party candidate Na Kyung-won, who is aiming to become a third-time lawmaker, is taking on the minor opposition Justice Party candidate Roh Chan, who is expected to absorb most of the votes from anti-Saenuri Party voters after the opposition camp last week joined forces to field just one candidate. Now, the two were neck and neck in the last opinion polls released last week, showing Na of the ruling party with less than 1% lead.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. So what's the voter turnout nationwide at this hour, and how will the final voter turnout affect the result?
Well, the latest voter turnout as of 9 actually stands at 5.6%, and that's pretty similar to past by-elections. Now, traditionally, the older generation have a greater turnout than the younger people, and because the older generation have a tendency to lean towards the Conservative Party, the participation rate of 20 to 30-year-olds will be a variable in determining the election result. Also, Mark, the weather, too, will play a role as well, as it's been very hot the last couple of days, and the mercury is expected to touch a sweltering 32 degrees Celsius this afternoon in Seoul, and it'll be even hotter in other parts of the country. Now, high temperatures, of course, mean less incentive for voters, the elderly voters especially, to make their way to polling stations. But as of now, I'm seeing a good number of voters constantly streaming in, so we will have to wait and see. Mark, I'll be back with more updates in about 2 hours' time.
OK, thank you very much for your report there, Li-an. Now, it's hard to say who's going to come out smiling once the results are out later this evening. From political alliances to the ferry accident probe, a number of factors are making half of the races too close to call. Our Choi Yoo-sun reports.
The ruling and main opposition parties believe they each have the upper hand in securing 3 of the 15 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections. As for the remaining 9 seats, 6 of which are in Seoul and the surrounding area, the election will likely go down to the wire. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's united front with the Minor Justice Party in the much-contested Dongjak B district in Seoul, as well as 2 constituencies in Suwon, Gyeonggi-do province, have turned the tables on the ruling Saenuri Party. While it remains unclear how the political alliances will affect voter sentiment, the ruling party spent its final day of campaigning highlighting its push to breathe new life into the local economy.
We ask you to elect candidate number 1 of the ruling party, who will work for the region, work for the nation to revitalize the economy.
The police and prosecution's failure to arrest Yoo Li-an, the practical owner of the mismanaged ferry that sank in April while he was still alive, and questions that remain surrounding Yoo's death have also become a hot potato in the upcoming elections.
The main opposition party is the force that can hold the Park Geun-hye administration in check. We earnestly ask that you give us the strength to contain the incompetent and irresponsible ruling power.
It's voter turnout, however, that will ultimately decide which party will come out the victor on Wednesday. The scorching heat and voting day falling on peak vacation season will likely affect the turnout. Choi Yoo-sun, ARIRANG News.
And as we heard in that report by Choi Yoo-sun, the fallout from the Seoul-Ho ferry disaster continues to hang over Korean politics and the whole country. The actual investigation into the ferry sinking goes on as well and is centering on 2 major areas. There's the ferry operator and its corrupt business practices, but also the poor emergency response that failed far too many young lives. And it was on that front that we saw the first arrest of a Coast Guard official on Tuesday. Park Ji-won reports.
Prosecutors arrested the captain of a Coast Guard patrol boat that was tasked with saving lives from the then-sinking Seoul-Ho ferry in mid-April. The Gwangju District Prosecutor's Office, which has been probing the Coast Guard on the Seoul-Ho ferry disaster, arrested the 53-year-old official, identified only by his family name Kim, on Tuesday. Kim was the chief of the Mokpo Coast Guard's patrol boat at the time of the disaster and is alleged to have ripped off official work records and fabricated new records that same day. The prosecution suspects he did so to cover up errors committed by the Coast Guard in its initial response to the ferry disaster. If he's found to be responsible for the failed rescue operation, during which only victims who were in the water were saved, prosecutors say they would consider charging Kim with negligent homicide. It's the first time authorities have taken into custody a Coast Guard official who was engaged in rescue operations at the disaster scene and comes amid mounting criticism of the maritime agency. Student survivors of the accident providing testimony in court on Tuesday against the sunken ferry's captain and crew members said there appeared to be more fishermen involved in the rescue operation than Coast Guard officials. They told a panel of judges they want those responsible within the Coast Guard to be punished severely. Seoul-Ho Captain Lee Jun-seok and 14 of his crew are currently on trial, accused of charges ranging from negligence to homicide. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News. The families of Japanese nationals abducted by North Korea in the 1970s and 80s may soon have word on whether or not their long-lost relatives are alive and well in the north. A Japanese wire service, Jiji Press, reports that Keiji Furuya, Japan's minister in charge of the North Korean abduction issue, said Tokyo expects to receive the preliminary results of Pyongyang's investigation into the abductees by late August or early September at the latest. Following an agreement reached in Stockholm in late May, North Korea set up a special committee to carry out a fresh probe into the fate of the abductees. This was in return for Japan promising to lift some of its unilateral sanctions imposed over North Korea's missile and nuclear activities. The Japanese minister added that Tokyo will continue to press North Korea on this issue until all the abductees are returned home. Said that a team of South Korean
Get connected to Korea and the world. Join us every weekday for the latest developments out of Korea, Asia, and beyond. On air, on your mobile, and online, we lead the way every day. ARIRANG News.
To try and resolve the crisis in Ukraine, the European Union also offers 50. Korea's production in the overall industry rose over 2% in June compared to the previous month. That's the biggest margin in more than 3 years, and the first time those numbers have risen since April's ferry disaster. Production in the mining and manufacturing sector went up by nearly 3% from a month earlier. That's the biggest increase since September 2009. Statistics Korea attributes the rise to an increased output in semiconductors and metal processing, driven by demand from both home and abroad. Investment in plant and equipment went down by 1.4% from May, but spending output edged up slightly by 0.3%, and that's signalling the economy hopefully is emerging out of its sluggish spending trap following the ferry sinking. But some other rather contradictory news, really, because Korea's business sentiment is actually forecast to hit a 6-month low in August. The Federation of Korean Industries says Korea's 600 biggest companies by sales are disappointed, in fact, by the sluggish rate of the economic recovery and the unstable consumer sentiment. The Business Survey Index rebounded after February, but started on a downward trend following the Seoul ferry sinking in April. The Federation attributes the fall to the frail economic situation, including the second quarter growth rate, which hit a 7-quarter low, and a 15-month low consumer sentiment index in July. Now, while the global settlement of the seemingly eternal patent spat between Apple and Samsung is yet to materialize, the dispute appears to be losing steam in certain respects, at least. Apple says it will drop a cross-appeal against certain Samsung devices and accept the court's rulings. Apple has already tried to get an injunction against these devices twice in the past, but was denied both times. Apple's lawyers told the court this week that they will now instead focus on winning an injunction in their second mobile device infringement trial. Now, even though Apple has dropped its cross-appeal, Samsung is still trying to have the original jury verdict overturned, and Apple is still seeking injunctions against some devices from the second trial, which took place earlier this year. Now, the monsoon season is over now in Korea, so we have to prepare ourselves for the intense summer heat that is coming our way over the next few weeks. Now, most summers in Korea, we normally have an unusually fierce heat wave, and it will last about a week maximum. But experts warn global warming might make them much longer, and the effects could be absolutely disastrous, as our Kim Min-ji reports.
It's very hot and humid compared to before, and there are a lot of tropical nights.
It has gotten much hotter. I visit Busan regularly, and it's the same down there. I can feel the humidity. Levels are high.
In Korea, heat wave warnings are issued when temperatures exceed 33 degrees Celsius for 2 straight days. Usually a heat wave lasts for 10 days on average in Korea, but experts warn that period could get much longer in the coming years. The Natural Disaster Management Institute says heat waves could last for at least 1 month by 2020, which could potentially lead to the death of thousands of people. Here's a possible scenario. During the first week, the heat will cause droughts, and in the second, the first fatalities will be reported. As the week progresses, the number of people succumbing to the heat will rise, and the prices of agricultural and farming products will surge. Into the fourth week, temperatures could rise above 40 degrees Celsius, threatening the lives of some 10,000 people. Transportation could also be disrupted as tires are liable to explode and railway tracks can bend and buckle. In fact, in 1994, when the heat wave lasted for 30 days, over 3,000 more people died than average, and there were blackouts and a shortage of drinking water. Experts warn the damage could be worse now.
We will see problems in the farming sector due to a lack of water. In the manufacturing sector, power shortages will reduce the number of working days, which will hurt the economy overall.
The institute warns heat waves could linger for up to 50 days in 2050, but by then it could be too late to reverse the effects of global warming. 김민지, 아리랑 뉴스.
Time now for a look through some of the international headlines we're following on this Wednesday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim standing by the news centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning, Mark.
Now, it looks like Russia's support of separatists in eastern Ukraine is going to have a very long and expensive toll on their already weak economy.
Right. The European Union and the United States earlier this morning jointly placing their strongest pressure yet in the form of far-reaching economic sanctions targeting the sectors of energy, banking, and defense. Here's our Song Ji-sun with the details.
The European Union and the United States on Tuesday announced further sanctions against Russia in the strongest international action yet over Moscow's support for rebels in eastern Ukraine. In Brussels, the 28-member European bloc agreed to restrictions on the trade of equipment for the oil and defense sectors. Russia's state-run banks will also be barred from raising funds in European capital markets. The move marks the strongest confrontation between Moscow and the West since the end of the Cold War. This latest action was triggered by the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 by what was likely a Russian-supplied missile. Moscow continues to deny the charges. The U.S. also imposed sanctions on Moscow by banning Americans or people in the U.S. from banking with 3 Russian banks. President Obama said if Russia remains on its current path, the costs on Russia will continue to grow, and that the coordinated actions of the U.S. and EU will make the weak Russian economy even weaker. The sanctions could cost Russia some $30 billion this year, according to online media EU Observer. But if Moscow slaps back with similar action, the EU could suffer damage estimated at $55 billion. To mitigate the impact on the European economy, the new sanctions will not affect previous contracts, and Russia's natural gas, which powers European industry and lights its cities, has been spared. Russia is the world's biggest exporter of natural gas and the second biggest exporter of oil. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
Israel's military pounded dozens of targets on the Gaza Strip early Tuesday, including the area's only power plant, after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his country needed to be ready for a prolonged conflict. Among those targeted was a Hamas satellite TV station, Al-Aqsa government offices, and a central mosque in Gaza City. The home of a top Hamas political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, was also demolished, though everyone in that home appeared to have fled prior to the attack. More than 120 Palestinians are believed to have died in the ramped-up Israeli airstrikes. Meanwhile, foreign pressure has been building on Netanyahu to rein in his forces. Both U.S. President Barack Obama and the UN Security Council called for an immediate ceasefire. But Israel wants Gaza's armed groups stripped of weapons, while Hamas and its allies want the Israeli-Egyptian blockade on Gaza lifted. Another knife attack in China, in the rest of Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. China's Xinhua News Agency reports a mob of people in Shachi County attacked civilians, vehicles, and government offices with knives and axes on Monday. Cars were also set ablaze as police shot dead dozens of people in that gang. The number of killed and injured in what's being described as an organized and premeditated terror attack is not yet known. A similar strike was observed in the county back in December. China's former security chief is being investigated for a suspected serious disciplinary violation, its state media reported. Xinhua News Agency said the probe on Zhou Yongkang will be led by the Communist Party's corruption watchdog, confirming suspicions after the powerful former minister had been missing from the public eye for months. Several people close to Zhou had also been probed for corruption in recent months. His investigation makes him the highest level government official to be probed for corruption in recent years. He was a member of China's top decision-making body, the Politburo Standing Committee.
And a good Wednesday morning to you all as we kick things off with the ongoing hunt for the new head coach of the South Korean national football team. Now on Tuesday, Lee Yong-soo, the head of the technical committee, was interviewed and talked about the current process. Now, Lee Yong-soo stated that starting today, he will meet up with the technical committee for 2 days and 1 night to talk about who they think is right for the head coach position. Now, he added that there are about 15 Korean candidates and 15 foreign candidates. Now, though he didn't reveal who they were, he did state that FC Seoul manager Choi Young-soo and Pohang Steelers head coach Hwang Son-ong would be in the final list of candidates as well. And now staying with football, this time with the upcoming Asian Games in Incheon, with head coach Lee Kwang-jong trying to finalize the roster for September. The big question is whether or not Son Heung-min will be available to play. Now, the 22-year-old, who is currently in Korea with his club team Bayer Leverkusen for the upcoming friendly against FC Seoul set to take place later today, he expressed his desire to play for the Asian Games team this September. However, his club team has yet to comment on whether or not they will let him, stating that they did not make their decision just yet. Now, due to his young age, he is eligible to play on the Asian Games team without the manager using one of the 3 wild cards. And now moving over to figure skating, while things have been rather quiet since the retirement of Kim Yeon-ah, figure skating fans here in Korea still have their eyes on Park So-yeon and Kim Hae-jin. And on Tuesday, their latest program was revealed. Now, according to their agency All That Sports, Park So-yeon will perform to Introduction and Rondo Capriccio for her short program and Romeo and Juliet for her free program. Meanwhile, Kim Hae-jin will be performing to Porgy and Bess for her short program, while her free program will be Rhapsody in Blue. Now, both skaters who are just 17 years old will continue to be in the spotlight leading up to the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Games. And now finishing things off with some Tuesday night KBO action, the Nexen Heroes crushed the Hanwha Eagles 18-3 with the NC Dinos all over Kia Tigers 7-3, and the LG Twins beat the Samsung Lions 7-6 in a close game. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Tucson Bears take on the Lotte Giants. And of course, going into the game here, a rather quiet game until the 4th inning when Kim Hyun-soo leads off with a solo shot to deep right field as Tucson takes a 1-0 lead. Now, 5th inning, more from Tucson. Kim Hyun-soo once again. This time, an RBI double makes it 2-0 before the captain, Hong Sung-in, with a 2-run double to right center, gives the Tucson Bears the 4-0 lead. Not done yet. Yang Yi-ji this time a 2-run single up the middle as Tucson now take a 6-0 lead. Now this leads to a 9-run 5th inning for the Tucson Bears as they managed to get 20 hits in the entire game, beating the Lotte Giants 12-1, your final score. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Good morning. Well, monsoon season ended as of yesterday, but due to atmosphere instability, there could be passing showers from the afternoon, but skies should remain mostly to partly sunny throughout the day. And it's going to be hotter than yesterday. Heat wave will get more intense. Highs in some regions down south will soar to mid-30s, so we'll have to deal with a sweltering heat today as the high in Seoul will rise to 32, while Daegu will climb to 34, and Gwangju and Busan should have a daily highs of 33 and 31 respectively. And for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will top out at 30 and 32, and Dokdo should see highs of 28 this afternoon. And as for the weather outlook here in Seoul, temperatures will be on the rise for next couple of days, but on Saturday we're expecting temperatures to drop a few notches, but it's still gonna be quite hot. So please take good care of yourself to prevent heat stroke by drinking plenty of water and avoid sun exposure when the sun shines too strong. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
OK, well, that's all we have for now. We'll be back with our next newscast at noon Korea time. Until then, goodbye.